Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a collaboration between myself and Michael K Vaughan, where we talk about comic book related subjects once a week. The same subject, the same line of titles, the same run on a title, same concept. It's Mike's choice. He picks every week, and I don't know if there's any connection between some of his recent choices and his recent utterly insane decision to read every Batman comic that's ever been written. But nevertheless, we are going back to Detective Comics. We're going back to Batman again this time around, to Detective Comics number 38 from the year 1940. So a long time ago, 85 years ago, which is probably one of the most famous comics ever made. It's this, where a new character is introduced named Robin. And the very first instinct, maybe the very first reaction that someone reading this might have had when they saw this issue on the stands would have been that Detective Comics is introducing a new character. That often happened. I remember when it happened to a character, a make-weight character called the Wyoming Kid, where the cover would be drawn of the book's standout stars welcoming that character. But that didn't mean that they were going to meet the character inside the stories. It meant that the comic, DC Comics, Detective Comics, or All-Star Comics, or whatever, was going to start running that character's separate stories. And maybe your first reaction to this would have been, oh, okay, there's going to be a new ongoing story in Detective Comics. Once Batman's story is over, we'll get the adventures of this character called Robin. But that was not the case. This is Batman meeting a character named Robin, effectively creating one. And in order to get to this character's origin story, we have to go to the beginning of so many evil stories, the circus. In the late 1930s, early 1940s, the circus was to comic books what radiation would later be for Stan Lee in comics. And at this particular circus, there is a high wire act, a trapeze artist act, the Graysons, a mother, a father, and a young boy named Dick Grayson. And the circus is being shaken down for protection money by the mob. We see top hats first of all, but there are mobsters who are shaking down the circus for protection money. Circuses travel; they aren't endemic to any one population, and they are notoriously poor on pocket sales. This would not have happened, but it is just the first of a million things that would not have happened. Dick Grayson, young Dick Grayson, hears the proprietor of the circus being shaken down and telling the two mobsters to take a hike. Boss Zuko, the crime lord of this area, can go suck eggs. He's not getting any protection money from the circus. And then the next night, the Graysons are performing when there is a catastrophe. They're not performing with their son. He's watching as the wires give out and John and Mary fall to their deaths. And the little boy is left alone in the world. We see him talking with a stranger with a carnation, and you can see in the background the clown is crying. And so is Dick Grayson. They're crying because his parents are dead. And we get a follow-up to the shakedown scene where the mobsters come back to the head of the circus saying, gee, that was a terrible shame. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider paying protection money? And he agrees this time around. And Dick Grayson wants to go to the police, as you would expect. He wants to go to the police and tell them what he overheard the first time. But he is stopped from doing that by a mysterious figure. A man dressed in a cape and cowl, Batman, stops him and says, you can't go to the police just yet. Instead, I want to take you into my home and hide you there for a while. Dick Grayson doesn't have his parents work the high wire. They have not assigned power of attorney to anyone in case they die. He doesn't have relatives. The circus? No. Instead, this stranger comes along in 1940 and takes this young boy to his home. And the young boy, Dick Grayson, decides, no, I don't just want your protection. I want to join you in your fight against crime. I guess you and I are both victims of similar trouble. All right, I'll make you my aide. I warn you, I lead a perilous life. And Dick Grayson says, I am not afraid. And so Batman makes him swear an oath by candlelight. The oath is, and swear that we two will fight together against crime and corruption and never to swerve from the path of righteousness. And Dick Grayson says, I swear it. Who are they swearing to? It's downright creepy. We're not supposed to judge this comic by the standards of a later era, but that is downright creepy. Regardless of whether or not the boy is going to stay in the Batcave and just do paperwork, that's still creepy to swear an oath like that. Batman, did he swear an oath to anybody? Is this a religious order? They train together. Young Dick Grayson is already better at acrobatics than Batman is. But they train in punching and boxing and judo and whatnot, and Robin gets an outfit. And the outfit is strange. Batman, until this point, has been a creepy figure of the night, a shadowy Zorro-type figure who steps out of the shadows, much like the Shadow, the character, the Shadow. Robin, first of all, he's given incredibly tight bikini shorts, little Robin Hood-type slippers, a bright yellow cape, and a bright, garish costume. With which to fight crime? It's the origin of the character, but then the story just stops. We're told that several months go by where presumably the circus and everyone else in town is being extorted by Boss Zuko. Several months go by where Dick Grayson is just living with Bruce Wayne. And we don't know anything about what happens in that time period. But after several months, Bruce Wayne decides to put a plan in action. He sends Dick Grayson out as a newspaper boy. I've already seen this before on Epic Comic Book Wednesday with Freddie Freeman, the civilian identity of Captain Marvel Jr. A little waif who goes out and sells papers on the corner. And he's no sooner doing that than a couple of other newspaper boys rough him up and say he has to pay them a percentage. Because even the newspaper boys pay percentages to Boss Zuko. And I guess they're just picking on the new kid in town. Dick Grayson goes back to Bruce Wayne and tells him this. And Bruce Wayne says, good, continue to act frightened so they don't suspect you. Now listen. And we don't hear the plan. We don't hear what Bruce Wayne is going to tell him. But Dick Grayson watches the newspaper boys pay somebody, I guess. Then he watches a car go from the city, see, tall skyscrapers there, to, in the next panel, the country. Little house surrounded by trees. Where he is, I don't know. Is he on top of a phone pole? He tracks them to that house and listens to Boss Zuko himself, who is in that house, and who is furious because he wants more money. He says that the take he's getting from everyone, including the newspaper boys, is not enough. He does not say that his take has dropped. He does not say that he is not getting enough as much as he used to. He just wants more. He's just greedy for more money. He tells his thugs to really put the screws to everyone in town, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, all of them. And so they do. They go out to all of these towns all these businesses where they collect protection money, and in each one they are confronted by Batman, who shows up and manhandles these goons, including a fairly elaborate gaming den where he just breaks through a window. He somehow manages to survive that experience and somehow manages to disarm all these guys before they can shoot him. And he continues doing this. It's just a whirlwind of him shutting these people down. And Boss Zuko is furious about this. The Batman. Shut up about the Batman. See? That guy walks in and out of my places and nobody stops him. I'm boss of this town. See? No one can do that to me. See? That's his gimmick. He's C. Very, very Jimmy Cagney C type thing. And he's ranting about this. He's ranting about Batman destroying all of his protection racket when he gets a box in the mail. And it's a bat. There's a bat inside the box with a note from Batman telling him, I know what you're planning for a certain building that's under construction downtown, and I'm warning you, you'll get no further with that than you have from anywhere else. This sends Boss Zuko into such a towering rage that he decides to go to that building under construction himself with his thugs in order to, well, I don't really know. I don't really know what his plan is. He appears to bring dynamite in order to sabotage the parts of the building that are not yet built. See, the upper stories, there's the street down there. Not very well drawn, but there's the street, and it's not quite finished as a building. And the people who own the building are not there. Zuko's thugs incapacitate a night watchman, but that's it. So why he's here and what he's doing here, I don't know. But apparently it was an elaborate plan of Batman's to lure him out. I want to keep in mind, I want to understress here that none of this makes any sense. Batman could not possibly have known that Boss Zuko would just at that particular moment decide that he wanted more money, that he wanted to increase the tempo of his extortions. Batman couldn't have known that that would happen. He didn't need Dick Grayson to know it either. Presumably he's watching what Boss Zuko's thugs do. Why he needs to wait several months? Why didn't this mood of greed come upon Boss Zuko much earlier? Why he needs Dick Grayson, I have no idea at all. He's watching these places. He knows when these thugs are there to demand payment. He doesn't need Dick Grayson to tell him that. He's there to stop them himself. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why he would lure Boss Zuko here to this building, high above the street in the naked girders. But he does. And when Boss Zuko and his thugs get there, Batman decides to attack them. And I guess get them to confess. No, he doesn't. It's Robin who attacks them. Robin comes sprinting out of the darkness and attacks these armed thugs, these gangsters. So not only is he traipsing around on the high steel, not only is he coming, as you can see, 4 inches away from getting shot, but he's confronting these larger men, these grown men, with nothing but a slingshot, which is, believe it or not, a neat gimmick. The slingshot is a neat gimmick. It underscores that Robin is a kid. And also, I don't know how many of you are familiar with either your Bible stories or with the appropriate scene and character from Lonesome Dove, but a slingshot in good hands can be deadly. It can be an incredibly effective weapon. And it's discontinued. I'm not really sure why, but it's discontinued. The most famous appearance of Robin's slingshot in the 80 years after this issue is in Batman Dark Knight Returns. And it's not Dick Grayson who's using his slingshot, and it's pointless anyway. But Robin is in full flood here. Batman is nowhere to be found. He's fighting these thugs on his own. At one point, he leaps off the girder to a cable with a hook on it and swings his way into these men. What if he misses? What if he has less of a grip than he thinks he does? No, instead he's just tossing these men around until finally he slips on a naked girder out in the middle of nowhere, stories and stories and stories above the street down below. And a thug comes up to him to stomp his fingers and get him to let go. Random chance that the thug does not just shoot him. Instead decides to do it the sadistic way. Otherwise he could just shoot him here. And there's literally nothing that anyone could do to stop it. But instead, Robin uses his acrobatic abilities to murder the man. He murders the man. He swings around and kicks the man off the girder to his death. So not only has Robin been sent into combat with armed men, armed gangsters, wearing nothing but bikini shorts, but he has committed, as far as we know, his first murder. When suddenly, finally, after this massive battle has taken place, gunshots have been fired. Did anyone in the neighborhood report this to the police? How about the people in the neighboring buildings? Did they see a man go off that building and fall to his death? Did he land on somebody? No, finally, Batman appears and tackles these thugs, including one who he dangles over open space in order to extract a confession. And you can see, let me zoom in here, that is the confession. Where does Batman do this? Where does he do this? There were no ballpoint pens in 1940. What is this guy writing with? Where did Batman have this piece of paper? Where did they write it? What's going on while he's writing it? Where is Boss Zuko? Boss Zuko is up here on the girders with a gun. There are other thugs up here with guns. Where are they? While this guy's writing out a signed confession. I haven't watched Michael K Vaughan's video yet. He does them first thing in the day, and I do mine later in the day. But he's a lot closer to law enforcement than I am. I'm sure that he will not miss the opportunity to tell you that this confession would be worthless. A confession written under duress while you're hanging from a girder 40 stories above the street is worthless. But I'm leaving that aside, legally aside. How did it happen? What happened to the action while this was being written? I guess Boss Zuko is just watching while he does it. Finally, he says, "You dirty squealer, see?" And decides to throw the man off the building. At exactly that moment, we get this panel, which, if it were drawn well, might at least be interesting, where Batman says, "Snap it, Robin." Zuko says, "Rat," and Robin says, "Got it." And the man says, "Yeah," because he is falling to his death. Zuko doesn't shoot the man and then throw him off. He runs up to where the man is standing and throws him off the building. The man is standing 6 inches from Batman. Batman does not save his life. It does not stop Boss Zuko. And we learn that snap it, Robin, means take a picture. At night, in the dark, of a moving person in 1940. With a camera that Robin clearly does not have on him. Feel free to Google what the normal size small camera was in 1940. Robin clearly does not have it on him. And is in no position, the only way that he could set up this shot so that it would even be recognizable as a man being pushed off a building is if Batman and Robin planned this and Batman knew he was going to let it happen. I don't know how any of this could be planned, but Batman grabs Boss Zuko and tells him that it's all up for you because not only do I have a signed confession from the man you just murdered, but we also have a photograph of you murdering that man. So you're going to get the electric chair, and that's going to be that. And the issue ends up with Bruce Wayne saying to young Robin, young Dick Grayson, "I really should wail on you for jumping in and attacking those thugs before I was ready." And Dick Grayson smiling and saying, "Well, it seemed like fun." This is downright weird. This whole issue is downright weird. It set a pattern that was going to be carved in stone for the next 50 years. A pattern of sidekicks, the teenage sidekick, which doesn't make any sense. And it makes less sense in this original appearance than anywhere else. Because Batman's world is dark and dangerous. I think in the issue right before this one, right before Robin is introduced, he is clubbed on the head by a bunch of thugs, tied in a gunny sack and thrown in the river. That's the life that he's introducing this little boy to. He says at the end of the issue, "Well, surely you want to go back to the circus." And for some reason, Dick Grayson says no. He's grown up with this circus. But for some reason, he says no. He doesn't want to go back. Uh, Instead, he wants to stay and fight crime with Batman. And hence, the crime-fighting team of Batman and Robin is born. But what do we know about that team? We know that Batman has no control over this boy. Robin is able to get all the way to the top of an unfinished building under construction and attack a group of armed mobsters without Batman knowing about it or being able to stop it. He says, I can't believe you jumped those guys before I was ready. Okay, that means the kid under your charge can do things like that and you don't have any say in the matter. Also, the kid under your charge has murdered someone. And maybe you have murdered someone, because how did that guy get thrown off a building by Boss Zuko, who we are at pains to be shown is 400 pounds if he's an ounce? How did he throw this guy off a building when this guy is standing next to Batman? And Batman can hear and see him coming. How did that happen? Unless you wanted it to in order to get an incriminating picture. Now, needless to say, this comic was, I think, the editorial idea was to sell this to kids. And not many kids were going to look at this and say, well, that confession would be worthless and that picture would be a blurry mess. And besides, someone's got to present both the confession and the picture. Who's going to do that? The guy who let this guy get thrown off a building? The kid who killed someone, who kicked someone off a girder a second before? Who are you? Take those masks off so that we can at least corroborate your... No, none of it would work. Now, maybe an 8-year-old kid reading this in 1940 wouldn't think that. Although, there was an 8-year-old kid about 50 years before this who would have thought that. Those would have been the first thoughts that came to his mind. But most 8-year-old kids wouldn't. And you have to assume here that the kid market is why this was done at all. Give Batman, put a kid into his story. And who knows what thoughts went into this from Bob Kane or anybody else? Did anybody think of Batman Jr. or anything like that? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what the process was for someone to come up with Robin. He's obviously, I think, designed as a bit of a take on Robin Hood and his Merry Men. There are signatures along that way in his costume, and he is a determinately upbeat character, happy and smiling, whereas Batman before, up until this point, has been mostly grim. And again, Michael K. Vaughan would probably be a better authority on this subject than I am, but I seem to remember reading that this worked. That sales of Detective Comics and Batman, when Batman became Batman and Robin, went through the roof. So the introduction of this little burst of color, this foil for Batman, this straight man, this quip teller, worked. It certainly doesn't work now. It certainly doesn't work now. If you had a character, a superhero character, maybe you could have a sidekick if you could elaborately explain it. But not this way. This explains nothing. This is Batman who leads a dangerous life. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Voluntarily deciding to induct a child into that life. A child who, in his first, as far as we know, this is his first outing. It's been several months. Maybe Batman and Robin have had adventures before now. But in this first outing that we see, Robin comes inches away from dying several times while Batman is nowhere around and kills someone. So it was interesting to revisit this. A lot of interesting stuff has been done with the character of Robin since this introduction. Obviously, because Batman has gone through a number of them. And there have been interesting moments, very tense moments. There was a retrospective legacy-style multi-issue comic book decades and decades after this, where from the man on the street's perspective, and the man on the street in one of those issues says, is it my imagination, or does Batman's Robin look younger than he did 2 years ago? Is it possible it's a different kid? And there was also a very good moment in a much later comic book where a couple of members of the Justice League confront Batman and say, how many Robins are you on now? Are you leading these children into danger? Not to mention, of course, Frank Miller's famous refrain from Dark Knight Returns, "Good soldier," where Batman refers to his Robin, who at that time is a young girl, as a good soldier. Uh, so it's as the kids say, a problematic idea all along, but some wonderful, wonderful iterations of the character have happened. Dick Grayson stays Robin for a long, long time. He becomes Robin the Teen Wonder as opposed to Robin the Boy Wonder. It, he stays Robin to the point where both his costume and his relationship with Batman starts to become just shriekingly odd, to the point where it has to stop, where Robin has to be a younger boy. And Dick Grayson, therefore, is aged out of the character, and he becomes a kind of generic superhero on his own named Nightwing, who has, we've talked about him on this channel, lots and lots of good writing has gone into Nightwing, and the idea of what it would be like if you were a grown man who had been raised by Batman. And other Robins have stepped in the meantime. There was the Robin, famously, who was murdered, not by criminals, but by comic book fans. DC Comics said, we're thinking about having the Joker kill Robin, and we're going to put 2 phone numbers in the comics, and those of you who want him to die can call one number, those of you who want him to live can call another, and we'll have Jim Aparo draw both. He'll draw both endings, just in case. And the fans decided, the particular Robin at the time was incredibly annoying, to kill him off. Now, it didn't stick, because this is Marvel Comics, but nevertheless, Batman comic book readers bought a comic book in which they saw the spectacle of the Joker beating Robin to death with a crowbar. And it's a natural consequence of this issue. And there's also, there's a character named Tim Drake who views Robin, his stint as Robin, as basically extracurricular activity on a college application. He tells Dick Grayson's Nightwing on a couple of different occasions, I don't plan on doing this forever. I'm doing this now, but when I'm older, I won't be doing this at all. I won't even be a superhero. And then there's Damian Wayne. It turns out later on in Batman continuity that Batman has a biological son. Dick Grayson is his ward, but that's it. Bruce Wayne never actually adopts him, which also comes up in an issue of the Teen Titans. But later on, Batman finds out that he has a son named Damian Wayne who's been raised and trained by a society of secret assassins. So he is amoral and a perfect killer, a little killing machine, which, again, renovates the idea of Robin as a teen sidekick. That makes a little sense. This Robin can handle himself, whereas this Robin cannot. I don't care how well you're trained by Batman in, I presume, the Batcave. You're not, if you're an 8-year-old boy, you're not going to be able to do anything serious against a grown man. Maybe with a slingshot from a distance, but not in hand-to-hand combat. That's just not going to happen. And that you avoid that problem if you have the child be supernaturally trained from the cradle to be a savage, vicious killer. But even then, there is an issue where, in the heat of combat, Damian Wayne is killed. He's practically bisected by a villain's sword. And Batman sees it, and it looks final, and Batman becomes absolutely obsessed on bringing him back to life somehow, and manages to do so. But that scene, the scene where a supervillain detains Batman just long enough so that Robin can be killed, well, that, again, is a natural consequence of this issue, this insane issue. It wouldn't be that Dick Grayson would get the final say on where he ends up. It wouldn't be that the final panel is Bruce Wayne saying, well, I suppose I should take you back to the circus. Dick Grayson saying, no, I'd rather stay and fight criminals with you. And Bruce Wayne saying, okay. It should be him saying, well, I know you'd rather do that, but nevertheless, you're going back where you're safe. And that doesn't happen. So after this, we get Batman and Robin. And the combination, the character of Robin and the combination of Batman and Robin was enormously popular. I think that it renovated the sales of both Batman and Detective Comics. And suddenly, Robin is everywhere. He had his own adventures forever and ever in another comic book. He was a backup feature in Batman, Forever and Ever, was one of the Super Friends. which had to be a bit of a cut on the chin to Green Lantern or the Flash. That when Hanna-Barbera was doing a Saturday morning cartoon called Super Friends, you had Superman and you had Wonder Woman and you had Batman, sure, and you had Aquaman, uh, but you also had Robin. Not Green Lantern, not the Flash, not Hawkman. It was Batman and Robin that you had for Super Friends. Uh, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I never sweated it all that much because neither Batman nor Robin is from Krypton. But rereading this issue, I get it less. I get it a lot less. So I think my capitalist response to rereading this issue will be to buy. DC Comics now comes out with big compendium paperback volumes. They did one for Nightwing. I showed it on this channel. And they did one for Robin as well. Not the Dick Grayson Robin, but the Tim Drake Robin. And I've held off on getting it, but I think now I probably want it. Just to Robin up the end of the year. So that is our Epic Comic Book Wednesday for this time around. It's the introduction of the Sidekick. A little boy or a teenager who a grown male adventurer decides will just face peril with him. Which might make sense if Superman did it and the sidekick were Supergirl, who is from Krypton and is invulnerable. But it doesn't make sense when Captain America does it, or Batman does it, or Green Arrow does it. That doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense from a danger standpoint, but also it doesn't make sense from a character standpoint either. Why would Aquaman go into combat, go into peril with a little boy? If he wants company, why wouldn't he pick the captain of his Atlantean Guard or the best fighter in Atlantis? Why would he go in? It's an odd phenomenon. So we'll just leave it at that. That is the introduction of Robin. This issue is probably incredibly collectible in mint condition and has been reprinted 1 billion times. That famous cover of Robin bursting through a ring of canvas, like at the circus. That issue has been reprinted 1 million times. And it was fun to revisit it. But who knows what Michael K. Vaughan will pick for next week. Will it be more Batman? I don't know. I don't know. At least he's not working his way through the X-Men. Or is he? I can't remember. I can't keep all of his incredibly ambitious reading projects straight in my head. If he's reading his way through all of the X-Men, that's going to kill him. That's a Widowmaker. Batman, maybe not so much. You get a lot of fun there. But anyway, we'll find out together. So I will reconvene next week. Thank you, BookTube.